The hidden father, Jonathan Whitmore, a man whose fortune towered as high as the skyscrapers he built, had never seen the world beyond his wealth. From the early mornings when the sun barely kissed the horizon to the late nights when the city lights flickered like countless stars, Jonathan thrived on power, on being better than everyone else. His mansion, sprawling over hundreds of acres, echoed with perfection and the discipline of a man who believed himself superior in every way. Among his staff was Harold, a frail man in his 70s, with a crooked back and silver hair that shimmered like frost in the morning light. Every day, Harold worked the fields, tended the stables, and carried burdens that most young men would avoid. Yet Jonathan saw him only as a tool, a reminder of the life he had escaped. "Move faster, Harold. Is that all you can do?" Jonathan would snap, his voice slicing through the crisp air. The older man would nod silently, hiding a weariness that no words could express. Jonathan enjoyed these moments, the subtle power, the humiliation. He would sometimes stand on his balcony, watching Harold labor in the sun, imagining how pitiful the old man looked, thinking, "This is why I am superior. This is why I have everything." But life, as it often does, has a way of hiding truth beneath layers of arrogance. One rainy afternoon, as the mansion's windows blurred with the pouring storm, Jonathan received a letter that would begin to unravel his carefully constructed world. The letter, brittle with age and sealed with a mark he did not recognize, contained a single statement. "You may not know me, but I am Harold's lawyer. There is something you must know about your past." Jonathan laughed bitterly. Harold? What could he possibly have to do with me? He ignored the letter for days, continuing his routine of belittling Harold until curiosity gnawed at him like a persistent shadow. He finally summoned Harold to the study, the storm thrashing outside like a warning. "Harold," Jonathan said, his voice tight with impatience, "what is this nonsense about my past? I receive a letter from your lawyer claiming you have something to do with me. Explain." Harold's hands trembled slightly as he took a seat, the wooden chair creaking under his weight. He looked at Jonathan, his eyes reflecting decades of hardship, silent endurance, and something Jonathan had never noticed before: a quiet strength. "Jonathan, my son," Harold began, his voice low and steady, "I am your father." Jonathan laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "Don't be ridiculous. You? My father? That's impossible." Harold nodded, sorrow evident in his lined face. "I was young, and I had to make choices that separated us. I worked the fields, trying to survive, trying to make sure you had a chance at a life I could not give. I watched from afar, proud, terrified, and hoping, always hoping." The room fell silent, the storm outside fading into a quiet drizzle as Jonathan's mind raced. Every memory of his life, his relentless pursuit of success, his disdain for Harold, his humiliation of the man, collided with this revelation. You're my father?" Jonathan whispered, disbelief mingling with a strange, aching pain. The arrogance that had shielded him for so long began to crack. The man he had mocked, tormented and dismissed as weak, was the very reason he was here, the blood that ran through his veins, the same as the one he had scorned. Tears welled up in Harold's eyes. "I never stopped loving you, Jonathan. Every insult, every harsh word. I endured them silently because I knew someday, somehow, the truth would matter more than pride." Jonathan fell into a chair, his mind spinning. Anger, shame, and a deep sorrow mingled in a tumultuous storm inside him, far stronger than any he had experienced outside in the rain. His life of arrogance and superiority seemed suddenly hollow, meaningless. Days turned into weeks, and slowly Jonathan began to see Harold not as a servant, but as a man of immense courage. He listened to the stories of his childhood he had never known, of sacrifices and silent suffering, and realized that every cruel word he had spoken was a wound he had inflicted on the person who had given him life. One morning, as the sun rose over the Whitmore estate, Jonathan approached Harold in the fields. The old man was tending to the horses, hands steady despite his age. Jonathan knelt beside him, a gesture he had never imagined he would make. "I am sorry, father," Jonathan said, his voice choked with emotion. "I have been blind, cruel, but I want to make this right. I want to know you, to understand, to be your son properly, if you will let me." Harold's eyes softened, and a small smile broke through the decades of pain. "It's never too late, Jonathan. We have a lifetime ahead, and perhaps now we can start anew." From that day on, Jonathan's life transformed. His wealth no longer defined him. His power no longer gave him satisfaction. True fulfillment came from rebuilding a bond with the father he had unknowingly humiliated for years. Together, they laughed, shared stories, and discovered a love that had been hidden under pride and misunderstanding. Jonathan Whitmore learned a truth more valuable than any fortune. The measure of a man is not in his wealth, nor in his power, but in his capacity to see, to understand, and to cherish the people who gave him life. And in that realization, he found a wealth far beyond gold. He found his father.